everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our new series, Remember That Time When. My name's Ferne, and I'm a therapist who specialises in working with OCD, panic and anxiety, and I work with this area because I've recovered.
My name's Andrew Mellich, and like Ferne, I'm also a therapist who also specialises in working with anxiety and OCD. And like Ferne, I've also recovered, which is why I like to specialise in it. Why are we doing this today?
Well, we was in the car not too long ago and we were driving home and we just got to talking about, the years that we were in recovery and how painful it was at times and the trials, the tribulations, what went well, what didn't go too well. And we just realised, we are sitting on so much, learning so many lessons that we can share with you guys about what recovery involves, like the nitty gritty details of what it's like and what we did to get to where we are today.
Looking back and almost laughing at some of the things we used to do, didn't we?
Big time.
And it's nice that we can sit here today and reflect on it with laughter, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because at the time, it certainly wasn't like that. So, do you remember that time when we both had sleep obsessions?
Yeah, I do. But I know we both had it at different times of our lives, didn't we? Before I even met you, you had yours.
Yeah, I think my sleep obsession was probably the first sort of theme of anxiety that I feel as though I had it when I was quite young. I'd say not even a teenager yet. I actually remember when the first instance of it happening, it was after I'd come home from a holiday in America, and I think quite simply it was the jet lag, and I just couldn't sleep because of the time difference. I couldn't sleep, and I remember being so exhausted I really wanted to sleep, and then when I finally did, I had a nightmare. And then once I had the nightmare, I think that kind of kicked up,
The panic.
The panic. I think probably one of my earliest experiences of a panic attack, and then from then it became a thing. It became something to obsess about. A thing, yeah. And it became something to obsess about, and then God, for years it was, how can I make sure that I do sleep, and what can I do to help it feel a little bit better? What different compulsions and safety behaviours, and I know we were talking before we did this about the different things that we've done, and just as I was writing the list in my phone, and I was like, God, I can't believe I used to do that, some of the stuff. So some of mine included, I remember having this little, like a portable DVD player, and I remember I used to be mad into the Simpsons TV show. And
Proper 90s.
Yeah, I remember being into The Simpsons, and I remember I had a load of DVDs, and what I would do is I would sort of like stuff them down the side of my mattress. And so I'd stuff them down the side of my mattress. And
How old was you?
Probably about, how old was I reckon this was 2007, late 2007, I don't know, 13, 14 maybe. And yeah, I would stuff these DVDs down the side of my bed, and just in case I couldn't sleep, then I could sort of just like watch them on this portable DVD, like propped up on my stomach, like I could watch this portable DVD player. And I remember counting up how many episodes of The Simpsons. So okay, I'd say to myself in my head, right, each episode of The Simpsons is like 26 minutes long. I can watch this one, and I'd like count it up, and then like, oh, I could get this far into this series, and then, it'll be fun.
What was the fear though? Like, what was that about for you? What were you scared of?
I just didn't want to lie there staring into space, and being alone with the feeling of not sleeping.
Because that's fear though, isn't it? Like ultimately, and I think this is what I've come down to for me personally anyway, it's about a fear of fear, isn't it? At the heart of it, it's like I don't want to lie there panicking and feeling stuck.
Yeah,
with
definitely. And it was like loads of different ways of trying to avoid that fear. Trying to get reassurance. I remember at the time I lived in like a little village, and it felt like the place completely shut down by about 10 o'clock. Thankfully, well, at the time for me, now I know that this was a huge safety behaviour. Thankfully, at the time there was a 24-hour Tesco, and I used to get a little bit of comfort from that, knowing that I'm not the only person in this village that's going to be still awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. At least there's going to be someone working in that Tesco.
At least I'm not on my own.
Yeah, and that gave me just enough comfort and it would help me sleep, I think, eventually.
But what we know now, don't we? And I think this is what we wanted to do with this series, is to tie in the theory that we know about OCD and anxiety. And actually what we know now is that those compulsions, such as...
check in to see, is the Tesco open? Check in to see, what episode of The Simpsons could I get to? Or different things like that.
The act of stuffing them down the side of your bed. I imagine if you cash your mind back, when you were doing that, you were probably panicking and anxious and telling your brain, if I don't sleep, then something terrible is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, at the time, very rarely, sometimes, but actually very rarely would I ever need to engage in watching The Simpsons. It was more the comfort that I felt, which I know is a big thing for people. It was more the comfort that I felt from having the episodes of The Simpsons there, just in case I couldn't sleep and I felt anxious about it.
Yes, and what we know about just in case is every time we do something just in case, it's a compulsion, isn't it? And the cycle of OCD, if you've been following my work, the cycle of OCD is that whenever we do a compulsion, all that does is it gives us very, very temporary relief for that night, maybe when you can't sleep, but all that it does is it reinforces that fear of insomnia, basically.
Yeah, definitely, because every time I stuffed the DVDs down the side of my bed, every time I thought, what episode I can get to, every time I checked, is the Tesco 24 hours, it was just teaching me, 13-year-old me, who I have a bit of compassion for now,
of course.
It was teaching me that, something is really wrong, and not sleeping is a massive issue, instead of...
Yeah, it's dangerous.
It's dangerous. The feeling that I have when I don't sleep is dangerous, and it's something to be feared. And yes, I wish I could go back and tell him it's okay, you don't need the DVDs, you should... I don't know. At the time, it did feel stupid as well, like, you shouldn't have to do this. But... Yeah,
but you didn't feel like you didn't know better.
No, exactly.
You didn't know better at the time. You didn't know better. And, back when I didn't... back when I didn't know any better, gosh, I was struggling with insomnia, a fear of insomnia, I suppose, for pretty much my whole life. I remember being a little girl and always kind of going downstairs being like, Mum, can I have a custard cream? Mum, can I... I was terrified of being on my own in bed, and what if I can't sleep? I know for me it really reached its peak, I think in probably like my early 20s, when I think in hindsight it weren't that it reached its peak, it was when my compulsive behaviours reached their peak. So I stopped, honestly I stopped being able to sleep over anywhere, sleep over at a friend's house. After a night out I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to have anybody sleep over in my own bed if me and my friends went on a night out. I'm sorry, but they couldn't sleep next to me. I remember I literally would have blackout blinds, and it was almost like I was nailing them. Like I would be stuffing everything that I can, like duvets and teddies and all sorts, to try and block out any little bit of light coming through, because I believe if there is any light coming through, that means that I can't sleep. I had a hoard of melatonin sleeping tablets that I would take religiously. They didn't work, they just kept me up, and then I panicked about that in itself. And it was just awful. I had a Fitbit watch, and I was constantly checking how many hours sleep have I had. I'd be looking at the clock, oh my god, I've not slept yet, what does this mean? I remember I'd go downstairs even when I lived with my mum and dad, and I'd say to my dad, because he used to be in the army, I remember begging him once, like, Dad, can you not just do something to knock me out and make me go to sleep? In tears. I was desperate to sleep, and really fearful of what if I can't sleep. I remember going to the NHS, going to the doctors about it, and they put me on an app called Sleepio, which could have been the worst.
You've shown me this.
The worst thing that they could have done, because what they ask you to do is, log. You need to keep a log of what time you go to bed and what time you go to sleep, and how many hours you've been sleeping, whether you've done any exercise, and whether you've done this and this and this, and you need to do your muscle relaxation before you go to bed, and all of these things. Ultimately, all that they were doing was teaching my brain insomnia is dangerous. And I would be up, I remember once I was up for 3 days straight, and I can still remember, I even got tearful then saying that, I can still remember that panic of, oh my gosh, I've not slept. And for me, what it actually boiled down to, and this is what I got to in my therapy, was that I was tiptoeing around an intense fear of my depersonalisation coming back. Actually, I had depersonalisation for the first time in my early 20s, and I came to believe if I don't sleep, then maybe my depersonalisation will come back with a vengeance and I'll go crazy. That was my fear. I know when we first got together, bringing it back to us, when we first got together, the travelling that we had to do, because I believed that I couldn't sleep next to anyone, didn't I? It was probably really awful for you, but I couldn't stay over at your house, could I? And we lived quite far apart. We lived like a 2-hour journey apart, didn't we?
It was a lot, weren't it? And I think it just goes to show just how much it can become the centre of your life and take over and get in the way almost, can't it? Because the travelling, especially for me, was a big one. I remember, God, I used to have to be up early for work, and if it was like a weeknight, when I come to yours, I wouldn't be getting home till maybe 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and then up at 6:30 and out the door. It can really have a knock-on effect, can't it?
Yeah, and it didn't make any logical sense, because what would happen would be you would come to mine, wouldn't you, like after tea at about 6 o'clock or something, wouldn't you? And you'd stay for maybe like 3 hours or something, and then you'd have to go for a big 2-hour long train ride home to only then come back the next day and do it all over again, because of my sleep obsession. I didn't believe that I would sleep if somebody was in my house, never mind in my bed. I remember a big step for us, wasn't it, was when you came to stay over at my house in the spare bed next door, and that was a big exposure for me, actually. And what was it like for you not being able to sleep next to your girlfriend?
Yeah, it was strange, but also at the same time, like, I had, because I think I'd already gone through mine at that point, so I could definitely see it from your frame of reference.
Yeah, I was terrified.
And understand what it was like. So I didn't want to the last thing I wanted to do was ever put any pressure about this is, it's just this or it's just that. That's not helpful in the immediacy of it. It's really not. So I definitely understood. Maybe if I could talk to myself back in that moment, knowing what I know now, all of these things, they are just like the little avoidances, and then they're just right. Oh, no one can be here. I have to have the blackout blinds and stuff. I think that's why education in both of our work, providing that education for people, is such an important part of it, because it's not just readily available, is it? Like, we've had to really forage and search for this stuff. It's not just out there, like you said with that app, and I remember you showing it me. It was really, I don't know what the word is. It was almost when, it's an official NHS app, and I'm like, whoa, this is fueling it even more.
Fueling compulsions.
Yeah, fueling it. It's more checking, isn't it, really? Yes. It's more checking and monitoring. How long have you slept for? What time? When actually what we do in our work is promoting, leaning into the uncertainty and embracing it.
And recognising that you don't need, and this was a big part of my recovery, actually, when I first started working in my own exposure therapy, was recognising that you don't need a full 8 hours, or any hours really, to be able to sleep. To be able to function. You don't need that. And I think that's a really common misconception when it comes to mental health recovery, is this idea that you need to have all of your sleep to be okay. Because you just don't. I remember, sorry, go on.
No, it's not. I'm just saying that's something that I used to get, until I recognised it for myself. I used to get it quite a lot, but it's also something I see in other people is, if I could just, because it's such a pushed narrative in, different forms of content. It's like, you need to get these 8 hours, you need to get a certain type of sleep. If it's, what is it?
REM sleep. Oh my God.
Yeah, I know you're better versed in those sorts of things. I don't really pay too much attention, but there's such a narrative about you need to get this certain amount of sleep at this time, and it's just not helpful. It's
so
not
harmful for anxiety disorders. So harmful.
It creates such a pressure on you, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that is what causes insomnia. It's the pressure to sleep. The more that you try, that saying, what you resist persists. If you're resisting insomnia as hard as you can, it's going to stay, isn't it? It's absolutely going to stay. I remember, for me, a big part of me making changes was when I met your little girl, Aurora, and gorgeous little girl. She was only 7. Was she 7 when we met? Was she 7 already?
No, I think she was 8.
She was only young, and I remember her coming up to me, and she was in a little nightie, and she was ready for bed, and I was ready to go home because I couldn't stay over at that point. I remember her saying to me, she was like, Fern, she was like, well, she called me Goose at the time. That's the story in and of itself. She's like, Goose, are you coming for a sleepover tonight? And I was like, no, Aurora, I can't, I'm sorry. And I remember her looking up at me with these big eyes, all confused, like, why? And I was like, I can't sleep over places. And it was so hard. I remember in that moment being like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right that I have put such a hold on my life, so much avoidance, that a little girl is like begging me to come for a sleepover with a daddy, and I can't do it. It was so in the way of my relationship with you progressing, wasn't it? And that was a big part of me getting help as well. I know the biggest part really in my recovery was to do an exposure, wasn't it?
Was that your first one?
That was
that
my
your first ever exposure? Was the sleep one, wasn't it?
Yeah, my first ever exposure was to do a sleep exposure, which was, if you've been working with me, you know, you'll be familiar with this, which is where you purposefully stay up all night to face your fear of insomnia. So I remember the therapist who I was working with, I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him, Anxiety Josh, I remember him saying to me, Fern, we need to make not sleeping not torturous. Because I was in tears, it was literally ruling my life. And so we came up with a plan. And I remember him saying to me, he was like, this never fails with insomniacs, it never fails. And I trusted him, so I went with it. And so the plan was I had to stay up at your house, didn't I, all night long.
I remember the bag you brought with you. It was indoors, wasn't it?
Yeah, all night long, don't sleep, but take nice things with you, nice things that you can enjoy. And oh my gosh, I brought my ironing, didn't I? I brought got an IKEA bag of stuff. In hindsight, was that overkill? Potentially,
but at the same time, you know, I think you can look back and think, look, it's your first ever exposure, and exposures can be scary. And going from, you know, it didn't have to be perfect. I think at that point it was just about you doing it, and I know the term white knuckling gets thrown about a lot. And yeah, okay, in the long term, that's what you want to move away from. But in the beginnings, you know, it's okay to do it, I think. As long as you're doing the exposure, like, it is okay to...
Yeah, it's totally fine. So I went to Andy's, and I went with the intention of not sleeping all night long. Now, that was my biggest fear in the whole wide world, was to be not having slept a wink and still then have to get on with my day. So I stayed up all night, I did my ironing, I was reading, I did, oh my gosh, you name it, I did it. And then the next day we went on a walk, didn't we? And I can still remember that feeling. I expected the panic to come, and it didn't actually, which was quite interesting. So I felt tired, I was a bit off, but I was safe, I was fine. I did a full night, no sleep. And what this did, was it showed me, and I can have this like in my back pocket, nobody can ever take this away from me. If in the future I ever have, by accident, a night where I don't even sleep a wink because of insomnia, I'm safe. I'm absolutely fine. I can do it. And I want to show you my little stick. So hopefully it isn't a mirror image. So I collected this stick. It's in the shape of a Y. And I collected this stick when we went on that walk the next day, didn't I? And I remember seeing this stick and being like, wow. And I picked it up. And I've kept it with me because this is I call it my Y stick. And this is, it's a reminder of why I do hard things. So when it comes to anxious recovery, we always talk about what is your why? Why are you going to do this hard thing? Why are you going to do exposures? And my why was you, really, and us and Aurora, and us having a family together, and us, you know, being able to grow in our relationship.
To not make it the centre of your life and have it take away so much. I think it's important as well is to remind yourself of the why stick, but now if you get a night where you can't sleep, you know, you're not frantically running to the why stick. Like, oh, I know that I can do it, and you know, that's not a behaviour in and of itself.
Absolutely
it's just a nice reminder.
It's symbolic. From the day. It is symbolic of my first ever exposure, and I keep this, you know, it's in my house, and I keep this because this helps me to recognise and remember why. So when it comes to doing hard things, my why is my value, which is the people that I love, really.
Living your life despite not being 100%, isn't it?
Absolutely. And honestly, since that exposure,
that was it, weren't it?
That's been it. I've not struggled with insomnia since. I might have the odd night where it takes me a few hours to get off. I've never ever had that night since where I'm lying there in full-blown panic attack and can't sleep. I've not struggled with it since. Because I've faced that fear of insomnia, and I know even if I don't sleep, I'm fine. And I think what it's given me is a sense of I can cope.
Yeah.
I can do this. Strength, really.
You'll be okay.
Yeah.
That's it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You'll be okay.
Distress tolerance, it's helped me to build up my sense of I can cope even if I don't sleep a wink.
Yeah, it is definitely. And I think that's such a massive part in recovery, and something we try to put across with the clients that we see is instead of having all these constraints of I'm okay as long as I have the sleeping tablets, I have the blackout blinds, I have this, I have that, I have the lavender pillows, or I remember one of the things is when you couldn't sleep and obviously we couldn't be in the same house, you'd be at home and I'd be at home and you'd FaceTime me in the middle of the night, and sometimes like you'd be able to get off, wouldn't you?
At one time, before we knew better about anxiety, we came to a decision. Well, if we want to be together, we'll just buy 2 houses.
Yeah, we'll just move in next door to each other on the same street. Yeah, we'll just move in next door.
Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah.
Weren't fine, but that was an avoidance compulsion that we thought, oh well, we'll just do it like that. We'll take the easy route out. I I never thought that I would get over this. I had almost like accepted as my identity, I am an insomniac, full stop. Like, this is never getting better for me. And yet I've overcome this, and I never thought, honest to God, I never ever thought I would overcome this, and I have. Which is brilliant. And nowadays, I keep when I was working through my recovery, I was really leaning on the work done by Kimberly Quinlan, who's wonderful. If you've not come across her work before, she's called Your Anxiety Toolkit, on Instagram. She's wonderful, isn't it? We just love her work, and she helped me through one of her books, the Compassionate Workbook for OCD, build up my kind coach. So that is when you learn to speak to yourself with a kind and compassionate voice, and it isn't airy-fairy, it's wisdom, it's knowledge, it's strength, and I keep that voice, that compassionate voice, with me still, even on the nights if I can't sleep. I keep that voice with me, and that's super helpful too.
Definitely. So I think that covers everything. It's to say about it.
Yeah, me too. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too.
This has been good fun. But honestly, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions about this, feel free, drop us a message or comment underneath. Anything to do with sleep or any ideas. If you can think of any videos you'd like us to do in the future. I've enjoyed sharing a bit of our journey.
Yeah, me too. It was nice reflecting. And we can sit here now and we can sit here and laugh about the things that we've done.
Yeah.
We can laugh about our old compulsions and safety behaviours. But we do appreciate at the time they felt like the most important thing in the world, didn't they? They were what helped us live and get through the night or the following day. That's what it was like for us.
I can appreciate how torturous all of this is. I remember, not to end it on a negative, but I remember pulling at my hair because I couldn't sleep, crying, inconsolable. I know this pain, I really do. But here we are, and we've overcome that, and you can too. I hope this has been a good series, and we'll look forward to seeing you again